The title is exactly what it says on the tin. I rant about opinions that have some popularity or I see constantly time and time again, whilst trying to remain somewhat civil. This content is a lazy form of content, meaning these videos have little to no research put into topics that they cover, thus they should not be used for any objective reason. These videos are nothing more of an opinion, and therefore I do not hate the people with those opinions, but the opinion itself. Do not harass others for having different opinions. You can debate in the comments, but please try to keep it civil. You got that? Now let's get into the video.
Hello, welcome to episode 5 of RAOISFOTI. Long title if you're new here, but it stands for ranting about opinions I see floating on the internet. So, this episode is a special one because if I was randomly blessed or someone out there decided, hey, you're getting your own Netflix special for some weird reason, maybe. Give me a Netflix special, I don't know what I talk about, but might just be this, honestly. But anyways, back to my point. If I randomly got a Netflix special and then someone showed them this video, I'd probably be cancelled. To be fair, there are a lot of topics I would like to cover that might get me cancelled. One of them probably being if I made a video, a RAOISFOTI on the N-word, because that'd be an interesting one. But I don't feel like now's the time for that, so that'll be later. It's a treat of some sorts. Regardless, let's get on to the point. As you can see the title of the video, this is about representation. Now, getting into this, what is representation? From what I understand, this video is, if you haven't listened to the disclaimer right now, you should understand that I have not done, I've done a bit of research onto this, but not enough that I feel like I'm accomplishing this topic, but also I just don't remember things very easily because most of this stems from a bunch of videos I've seen of YouTubers talking about representation, a bunch of Twitter stuff I've seen about representation, even though you really shouldn't take Twitter too seriously anyways. A lot of the stuff I know about representation, at least, what I understand about representation, mostly comes from just essentially what a video I watched. Actually, there was a video I watched by a YouTuber. I think her name is Sarah. I think in one bit of it she was talking about representation, and then in that video she links to someone else. She was basically, oh, if you don't understand why representation is important, here's this video. And I clicked on the video. Honestly, I still came out of the video going, I still don't feel the same way about representation than I have. This really hasn't changed my mind. Okay, back from that tangent, what is representation? And what do I think representation is? From what I understand, representation is essentially having something within a certain identity shown in the form of media. So this could literally be, I don't know, a random Hollywood film set in Nigeria. That's representation because it's that film is having Nigerian representation. You know, it's having Nigerian culture, or, you know, with various Nigerian traditions and customs. That's representation. That's what I understand. You know, it could be having, you know, the Pride Parade, which will represent all parts of the LGBTQIA+ spectrum. It could be a boardroom, maybe just something like a boardroom having people of certain identities to represent them. So that's why I understand about representation. So that's what I've understood from people who have, that's essentially what I've garnered from what people have said about representation, or when they've mentioned it. That's what I garner. So why do people feel representation is important? Usually, representation is important because it's intended to offer a range of diversity, especially like the boardroom example. Diversity usually means all opinions are covered, or all aspects are covered. Essentially, if I use an example, so for example, a black person with governmental power is more likely to bring up issues that tend to disproportionately affect black people. Obviously, an African American would have experiences with being African American. They'd have experiences with that identity that would result in them more likely to be able to bring those issues up. As we see in the real world, and at the highest stages of power, that's not always the case. But that's because of other interests involved, such as money, but I'm not gonna get too political here, even though this is a political topic, but whatever. Anyways, representation, essentially, it allows marginalized groups to feel as if their existence in the world is valid. If you're a marginalized person, you usually kind of have these feelings of self-doubt. You feel you don't fit in the world doesn't want you. And so having a form of media represent your identity well makes you feel like you're valid. You know, one person in the audience might feel as if these groups aren't marginalized anymore due to progression in society, but clearly that's not the case for some people, or it just isn't the case at all. And I'm not going to get into this whole political argument of statistics and other things and other things and other things and layers and layers of history and then layers and layers of statistics about marginalized people. And if you're that kind of person, I would like you to think why certain statistics related to these groups are the way they are without resorting to debunked theories or eugenics, please. Representation allows the wider world to view these groups as normal and not alien. This is kind of the thing I see why representation is important. It can create positive attitudes. Essentially, seeing a normal gay couple in a children's cartoon normalizes their existence. The child believes being gay is okay, or being gay is normal. Same thing applies with race. Just seeing a black person on a TV screen makes the child think, oh, hey, there's people with different color skin than me. You know, there are lots of places in the world where kids have probably never seen a black person in their lives, or they might not have any access to any media where that's the case, which is why representation might be important there. And so, how is representation usually applied in media? How is it seen, or how is representation viewed in media? In this video, we're going to be more specifically referring to representation in media rather than for occupation. I might talk about occupation, but we'll see how I get onto that. But as it feels like, especially in TVs, movies, or any form of entertainment, it feels like representation is such a hot button topic because one side typically tends to feel that representation is forced diversity, because it only really makes characters with certain identities only special just because of their identity and nothing else. So it's like feeling that, I don't know, a certain character is just, they're just the black character. I can't use an example because I literally can't think of one in my head because to be honest, I don't watch enough Western television to really find that. So, yeah, and also this other side this one side might feel representation doesn't need to happen and we should only focus on characters being written well first. Sometimes some people feel that representation is being used to disguise bad writing, and they also feel representation is only really used as woke points to make themselves look good in the eyes of the public. Maybe that they think the company is trying to make themselves look better, in the court of public opinion. They want to make themselves seem like they understand the struggle, or they're trying to pander. This is the term I usually see thrown around. They're essentially trying to appeal to those people for more money, so because they look good, it looks good to be doing these things. Another aspect of representation is that it adds politics to entertainment mediums that are solely meant to be an escape from reality and politics. Some people feel that representation isn't realistic to the real world, which I've seen. That's a point I've seen thrown around. People feel that representation is used to just change established characters, or that representation is just used to fill out a quota. And I also see, personally, and this is one I usually do see and I can kind of get, is people who care about representation won't be happy and will just ask for more and more and more. My opinion on representation is that I don't know if I don't hate it. I don't hate representation, but I do feel like I don't hate it, but I don't care for it. I personally do not care about representation in my store, in writing. I don't care if a company does do it, as long as it's good. I don't care. But I'm not gonna act like representation was the main reason, this was bad. So here are my personal feelings. Representation, I believe, at its core, is not inherently bad. It's good. It's definitely important in media. Entertainment tends to have more power than people think it does than just entertainment. It's important I think it's important that people realize this. For example, if we look at the Joker as an example, I remember seeing people using the Joker, using it as a symbol for revolution from the Joker movie, and however, I also do feel like it is necessary to realize some entertainment is just entertainment at the same time, and forcing it to be political is just destructive where things aren't enjoyable anymore, where something has to have some political motives and trying to find meaning where there isn't. You know, it's the old case of English literature again, taking over, trying to take over. I got a D in that subject for A level, by the way. I can understand the argument that it can be used to hide bad writing. Personally, I tend to just not watch badly written things. If it's bad, I tend to drop it. Granted, I'm still watching Ruby, so, you know. But personally, I feel like if something was bad, I don't think not having representation would have changed it anyways. It still would be bad. You know, if it was badly written, it was badly written. That's not the fault of representation. So, I kind of understand when things are marketed for representations, it just feels like they're shielding it. I think the issue is, you know, when companies will market their products just based on the fact that it's diverse, it has a lot of diversity to it. It feels like they're using it as a shield rather than, you know, just advertising the show for its own thing. I mean, it is an aspect of the show that they use as a selling point. That's fine. But, you know, at the end of the day, if it's not entertaining, it's not entertaining. And if people don't watch it, then they don't watch it. If it doesn't make money, then it doesn't make money and the show's over. You know, I think it's personally, if you enjoy representation and you want to watch that, then enjoy it. But this is my opinion, and you came here for my opinion. So, and it's also even more interesting when you can also tell it even feels even more like a shield, especially when that's the discourse around that piece of media. Essentially, it's discourse around the show or the TV series, you know. And it's funny because the people who are against representation feed into it so much that they actually fuel they're the ones fueling the discourse. Like, I think it's interesting because I see that a lot on Twitter. Personally, if I don't like a show, representation was not going to save it anyways. Chances are, for me, there's another aspect helping the show. If a character's only interesting trait is their representation, it's because the writers did a poor job of showing their character. I don't think it's the fault of representation, but mostly the writer thinking that only representation was the only thing they needed, and that's the writer's fault. Because I do kind of, because you can kind of get this when you're a creative, because whenever you get feedback from someone, you tend to just focus on that feedback, and you don't really focus on the other things that you maybe might have missed. That person didn't even pick up were problems. And so, you know, that's kind of the fault of the writer, really. Only a case of the writer just did a poor job showing the character. It's not really representation's fault. It's just the writer not being good. I also agree with the statement that characters need to be well written, but I feel like everyone is overthinking how representation works. Because I feel like maybe it's just me who's just thinking this, especially because I've always thought about this whenever I create original characters, especially when I was like 11. Jesus Christ, well, I've been on the internet for way too long. If you want it to be simple, it's as literally easy as thinking up a character without any pre-established identity, unless it's important story-wise, and then giving them the identity afterwards, or just changing the identity you made already. Because I don't think it's something you really have to think too hard about, you know? Because I always had this, because personally, I never thought like that when I was a kid. Usually, personally, for me, when it came to thinking about a character's identity, when it came to gender or race, it was usually a case of, do I want to make a female, do I want to make a boy character or a girl character today? Do I want a boy or a girl? I'm basically being a pregnant mother right now, just trying to decide on what they want their child's gender to be, or what they hope their child's gender is going to be. I mean, to be fair, I do tend to think of their identities first because mostly race and gender are the ones that are kind of based on appearance-ish, sorta. I mean, race definitely, but you know, this character, I originally envisioned her as a cis woman. Now she's a trans woman. It's literally just a simple thought. You just go through that process and do it. I don't think representation requires careful planning. All you really need to do is just avoid using dumb stereotypes. You're not falling into dumb tropes, but honestly, tropes aren't bad at all. Personally, I feel like companies use representation to shield. It just means the show is kind of bad. It just means, chances are, I probably wasn't interested in consuming their thing anyway, so I'm not gonna complain and moan about it on Twitter, really. I just don't care. I just probably would have just dropped it instantly, honestly. I can understand the point that companies use representation to score points because they're companies. Their main goal is to exploit something. Their main goal is to exploit something that they're selling. Marketing representation is definitely a good way to market your product, and I can understand how it's absurd. Some companies can have partnerships with groups that literally defy the message they try to market only because it's now accepted. Or some companies will use representation in places where it didn't really need to, as a marketing point where it didn't need to be. Monopoly? I mean, I can see the point. I can see the distaste for not wanting too much politics in your shows. But personally, I feel like, especially because I don't feel like that's even possible. Because most entertainment you watch has some political meaning you can grab from it. And also, I'd just like to mention that, like, people of color or gay people existing in a story is not political. I'd like to point that out, that is not a political thing. The argument about, it's not realistic to the real world because, obviously there's no, you can't have a black person in this movie set in China because there are no black people in China. I mean, it's that person's story. If they wanted to randomly add a black person in, they can. It's a fictional world, honestly. I don't think it's trying to represent reality, but to be fair, it is also a representation of China, so, things get finicky there. Personally, I don't care. And personally, I just do not care. If you want to have a black person in China, you can have a black person in China. Plus, fiction does not have to represent reality. I'm not interested in a story that contains a black character and is just all about the struggle. The struggle. To me, it's boring and it's been done before. I only really care if it's done in an interesting way or it's done in a way that I would like to watch it. I don't know. Plus, especially if the black person is not the main character, why dedicate this amount of time to their struggle? There doesn't need to be a specific reason why they need to exist unless it's for some pre-established reason. They just exist. People travel. Planes exist. People can go from one place to another. It's not that insane to expect. It's not that insane to be there. The idea that representation can be used to change just established character, yeah, that I dislike that. I kind of dislike. Personally, I don't care if it's. For me, it's not really a problem if the character's whole identity isn't their race. But to me, it's insanely stupid when a character's whole identity is changed just because of representation. Just make a new character. You do not need to depend on a pre-established IP just so you can have diversity, just for diversity. It just feels like you're only using the IP just so it gets more people out there, and so boom, you have your diversity. To me, it feels like a calculated move because it feels like the intention is to show, we're progressive, we care, we know representation. You can be this too. You can be that. You can be, I don't know, Goku can be black. Goku's entire existence is tied to his race, but it just feels like if someone just came out with a movie and just made Goku black, it's like, hey, look at this representation here. Here, Goku's black now. See, we care. I don't care if Mary Jane is gonna be played by a black girl, because Mary Jane, at least to me, I never really saw that as being the basis. I never really saw the basis of her character being white. I mean, she was a redhead, so it kind of was. But it doesn't really bother me, but sometimes I feel like it's calculated, especially the way the media will heavily advertise it, the way publications will be talking about it, or the media will act like there's some heavy backlash because two people on Twitter said something bad about it, or two nasty people said something awful about this news, and the media's all like, look at the wave of backlash this person is getting. Look at it. These evil, vile, disgusting human beings. I also understand that it being used to fill a quota, that's a weird one, honestly. I can sometimes feel like representation is just used as a checkbox to make sure you're not offending anyone, or you make yourself look good, especially because of how it's celebrated. And I do understand the point that some people who care about representation just won't be happy and will ask for more and more. Because I definitely see this. I've seen this on Twitter. Because you know, I've seen people just get annoyed about it. I remember the actor Ruby Rose. I remember apparently she was casted for something, and the main complaint was that she was the safe lesbian choice. Or sometimes people just complain about how, oh, this character is a woman, but she's not a person of color. Or this character is a person of color, but she's too light and thus a safe choice. That comment there has a lot of stuff to do with colorism, which is a pretty big deal in the black community, and I do not have the amount of knowledge into this topic, but that's also something I see. How do I feel of representation, or how has representation affected me? Representation to me, if you didn't know, I'm black. I am from the United Kingdom, but I'm ethnically Nigerian. Both my parents are Nigerians, and they're from there. I am also a cisgender straight man too. I'd also like to remind you that race, ethnicity, and nationality are different things. I don't care about representation, but I also do see why other people do. I don't care, at least when it pertains to my identity. I'm mostly going to be talking about being black in terms of representation. I'm mostly going to be talking about black representation in this part here, because, you know, from what I've seen, the rest of all the identities I mentioned are pretty much represented in the entertainment I consume anyways. So, I literally watch anime, which does have black people in them, but when they don't, I cannot care. It does not bother me. You know, and it's easy, very simple thing to think about it. A person living in Japan has probably only ever met a Japanese person in their life, and their only experience with black people is most likely going to be from American media. Which is also, in a side note, kind of important why it's done right, so people don't make terrible stereotypes of black people. In my opinion, a black person being absent in a story doesn't really matter to me. Because, you know, some people mention representation because, oh, you need to have someone to relate to. A black man being in a story doesn't really matter to me. I don't think I even relate to black characters in television or just in any entertainment. I don't think I even relate to fictional characters. I've always avoided trying to relate to another character because I'm just not interested in seeing myself, and I would rather see someone else. It's kind of the same thing with music, where I'll mostly avoid songs in which I heavily relate to, because it just feels cringy to rap or sing to. Personally, I just don't like the idea of people trying to figure me out because I relate to this character or I listen to this music. I just hate assumptions based on just small things in general. But, you know, don't get me wrong though. To me, it's a little bit eye-raising in a horror movie when the black character is the first to die, or when there are no black characters in a Hollywood movie, usually, especially because, you know, America is like, what, 13% black? And so, personally, I mean, and even then, in that case, I still just don't care because there are tons of movies to watch. If the lack of representation in the show really bothered me to an extent, to such an extent that I wanted to moan on Twitter about it and I wanted to complain about it, I would probably not watch it unless there was something else pulling me. Like the representation, the representation would have to be bother me. The lack of representation would have to bother me more than the thing that's pulling me in is. And honestly, honestly, if it's important to you, then just don't watch it. Personally, if it's important to you, if representation is important to you, then don't watch it and go watch something else and support it. You know, personally, I probably should do that. If there's a show that doesn't have any LGBTQIA plus characters, then you go watch that and support it. I think personally that's fine. The internet is a wide place, so there's a lot of niches you can find of anything. If the idea of representation grosses you out, then go watch something else and support that. Go there, honestly. I just feel way too comfortable with myself for something like representation to really bother me anymore. I'm either way too happy or too apathetic for representation to really bother me anymore. However, I feel like it's a different story. Representation, it may be a different story when I was in my childhood or in my adolescence. Because I would definitely say representation, as I mentioned, representation for kids and for children tends to matter a lot more, because that's where most of your development happens. You know, to me, it definitely mattered whilst I grew up. I really liked Static Shock as a kid, and that's mostly literally, I mostly liked Status Shock as a kid, and the Proud Family was hype. You know, that was mostly probably because those characters were black. The shows were good, but you know, they were also good characters, and they were black. You know, they had black characters in the forefront. They had characters that looked like me. It was definitely cool to see, because most of the time, I tend to see white characters most of the time. So, yeah. Keep in mind, I was a child. Most of these situations happened when I was from my kids to my when I was a child to my teens. For me, it was nothing really more than anything superficial, but they were good shows. Although despite the fact that I mentioned I like them for superficial reasons, it's kind of funny because really, even today, to this day, I still only really like characters for superficial reasons. Like, most of my favorite characters are just for superficial reasons and nothing deep. And it's even funny because, like, representation also kind of hit me in a weird way in my teens, because it was funny because there was one YouTuber I watched who I think had very similar opinions towards representation, and you know, I only watched him because he was black and had thoughts that I don't share between other black people that aren't just straight up self-hate. You know, he's not being Candace Owens. He's also not being Francesca Ramsey. I've got myself cancelled, haven't I? Another interesting way of representation hit me in my teens was with Ruby. Literally, I was just trying to remind you, like, Emerald. I think the only reason Emerald is in my top 5 characters, like, back in Volume 3 or 2, Emerald basically, not even then, Volume 1, at the end of Volume 1, Emerald literally became my top 5 characters of all time in RWBY because she was the first black character to appear on the show. That was it, nothing else. Adam is literally my 3rd most favorite character, literally because RWBY is a show about 4 women kicking ass in cool animation, but at least Adam was shown as a highly competent male character with impressive skill. Like, I only like Adam because he was a cool looking male character. None of the other male characters in RWBY are cool. Don't even mention Crow, because Crow is awful. I'm sorry, but like, if you're a Crow fan, stop. Don't even come to me saying Crow's cool, because I've never found Crow cool. Yeah, RWBY, because like, if you think about it, RWBY was a show about 4 women kicking ass in cool animation, but Adam was shown at least as highly competent. You know, he's a highly competent male character with impressive skill. His semblance can also keep in mind, his semblance can also change the color of the show. He's an instant badass right there. He basically, to me, he exuded coolness and determination. Like, he was cool to me, you know. Adam remained in that list up until Sun existed, and I like Sun, despite the fact that I still like Adam too anyways, because just being cool. Most male characters in the show were kind of unimpressive abilities-wise. Crow, as I said, was never cool. Kind of lame, to be honest. I didn't like how his fight was animated, unfortunately. He didn't really leave a long-lasting impression. And now, guess what? I hate most of the characters in RWBY, so guess how that turned out. Personally, I'd like to say representation isn't that deep when it's done. I don't really care if it's there, and I also don't care if it's not. However, I don't care if people do care about representation. If you want representation and it matters to you, then that's fine. You are allowed to not watch it. Same goes the other way around. If you feel like a piece of entertainment is pandering to you, you don't have to watch it. Personally, representation is not a factor that negatively affects the show, as I feel like representation is just an element that can maybe accent a show. You know, it's merely just an accent to a show. It's like, oh, especially within the context of the world that we're in, it feels like for the people who care, it merely accents the show. I think the one thing that I really dislike though is just the amount of vitriol people throw at each other, the amount of assumptions people make about each other, that people who are for representation are against representation, and I kind of hate it when people jump to like weird conclusions without trying to know the other person. I get it. All these arguments happen on Twitter and it's on the internet, and people don't really care to want to understand each other on the internet, or you don't really have time to understand each other on the internet. Because let's be real, who is going to waste time trying to get to know someone you're arguing against? Or maybe you want to have time to get to know someone and then later find out they actually want all black people chained up and dead. I feel representation is not important. I personally cannot care to me, because first, this is my opinion. I feel like the people who care about representation, you care about it. If you don't, you don't. I feel like there just doesn't need to be just random arguments. If there's anything you can take away from this video, just stop arguing on Twitter. Honestly, Twitter is the worst place to have any form of debate. It is the worst one to have any form of debate. It's just the way it's set up is just not great for any form of healthy debate or discussion. It's just dumb. Just don't. Please just do not have debates on Twitter. Just stop arguing on Twitter, please. I beg you. And in this video, I'm mostly going to talk about being black because really, I'm mostly going to talk about being black because, at least from what it seems like, or at least people have said to me, that seems to be the one that is the most I can understand the argument that it can be used to hide by. I can understand the argument that it can be used to hide by. Oh my! I can't say bad. One person in the audience might feel as if there might be this one tiny person, or shit. There's probably think about the character without any priest ever D, unless it's story important, unless it's important. I forgot her name. I can't remember her name is Susan or Susie or she makes similar video. Sarah, I think her name is Sarah. Basically, she makes similar videos to Lindsay something. I don't know her name. All I remember, I think she was a part of a nostalgia critic thing who did some bad stuff to the employers, but I literally can't remember her name. Wow, her name is like left me because I can only think of Lindsay Lohan or Lindsay Jones from Achievement Hunter, and now my brain is stuck. Anyways, wow, this is how bad my brain leaps. You know, I've always tried to avoid, I'm still recording. I don't know why you walked in. Bruh. I'm still recording. You can go, just keep going, you can make noise. I don't know why you're trying to stealthily just walk. I can cut this part out of the video. Thank you.